I've now got the hammer we've modeled in Lightwave layout. What we're going to do is shift gears a little bit. We have one more model to create, which we're going to then use in our flocking and instancing and things like that. But here, I'm going to take the hammer we built and show you how you can light it and surface it and render it. And this kind of ends a little bit more of the basic stuff, and then we'll get into some of the more advanced stuff. So the first thing I want to do is make sure my hammer is selected. I'm going to press the T key, and you're going to see the handles pop up. And these handles help me move my object, and it moves on the green y-axis up and down. Blue is my z, which is actually a little more, you should consider it a little more like this, like forward and back is the z, like that. And then the red is the x, left and right. But notice it's all moving right from that head of the handle. That is because when we modeled this, we started with a simple cube right at the 0, 0 axis. XYZ 0. And of course we went that way for the head and went that way for the tail and that way for the handle. So is this a problem? Well, not necessarily, but if I press the Y command on my keyboard and go to rotate, well, now my hammer is rotating from here, kind of like it's hanging on a hook. And that's not what we need, because if we're going to have somebody, kind of hit this and use it, which we're not in this video, but if we were, you'd want that pivot to be correct. So it needs to be down here in the handle. Okay, so in order to change that, you very simply come over to Modify and choose Move Pivot. You can also do it in Modeler, and I had showed you that in an earlier video. But I'm going to change Move Pivot down there like that. But in 3D, remember to check things from other views. So I'm just kind of holding the Alt Option key and rotating around, noting that that pivot is perfectly centered in the middle of that handle there, kind of about midway down. We'll turn off Move Pivot just by clicking on it. You can go back to move, and then we're going to go to rotate again, and now rotate by pressing the Y command. You'll see the hammer rotate right from there. And in fact, as I've done this, I think I might move it down even more right to the grip, kind of like that. Just clicked on the Y handle and dragged it down. Press the Y command for rotate, and there you go. So now the hammer can rotate a little bit better. Okay, so just a quick thing about pivots. All right, now let's talk about our lighting and how we're going to light this, and then we'll do some surfacing. So what are we going to do with this? Well, let's set it up as a product shot. Part of lighting and surfacing, and I used to always separate these more, but I kind of do it all together now because everything is such a part of the final render. The surfaces, the light, and the environment. So I'm going to go to Modeler Tools, and under Geometry, I'm going to choose Ground Plane. It's the first one right there. And this panel comes up. It says 10 meters width and depth. Well, how do I know what 10 meters is? Look down here. See the scale? It's 1 meter. Okay. And then my grid is 10 meters. That means I'm going to have one square in here is a ground plane. So for instance, watch. See that? It's the exact size, press the T key, of one of these, 10 meters. See that? So that's how you know. And I just did Command Z a couple times undo. So what I'm going to do is press Shift H, not R, and we're just going to scale that up. Now, if you didn't want to do that, let's say you wanted to just do it numerically, press the minus key and you can actually clear that selected object. Then come back to Geometry and choose Ground Plane, and let's choose 100, hit the Tab key, 100. And if you wanted some segments in it, which we'll do later when we get to replicators and things, you can add that here. You can give it a surface name, and you can save the object. So we'll click OK. And now I have a nice ground plane that's at the perfect flat 0 filling up our scene. Then, down here from the list, because we have two objects in our scene, we're telling Lightwave we're working with objects, and in here we can choose which object we want. In this case, the hammer. Press the T key and I'm going to move it up. And now that I can rotate it easily, I'm going to rotate it down like that. And then I want to lay it on its side. But look what happens. Look at the rotational handles now that I've rotated it. Both the bank, which is the blue, and the heading, which is red, are on the same axis. Okay. Well, this is something we haven't talked about yet. If you come over to the Modify tab, down under the General category, there is a coordinate system. And in here, you can change the coordinates for your scene. So in this case, it's set to parent, meaning the object itself. If I change it to local, well, look at that. Now that works okay. Now if I change it to world, it rotates even better. So we can still do our y-axis here, and now this rotation is working based on the world measurement, which is what we want. Okay, so if that ever happens to you, just change that coordinate system. So what I'm going to do now is kind of rotate around and just flatten this out. Something like that. Press the T key and I'm going to move it up. And I just want to make sure that head is not tipping into the ground too much. Now, every once in a while you're going to get, see how it moves? It's not quite precise enough. I'm just kind of moving in big chunks. That is because my grid size needs to change. I can press my left bracket key, and if you look, that changes the size of my grid to 500 millimeters. It also looks like I just zoomed right in, which I didn't. So I can press the comma key and zoom out, or just click and drag on this guy. And look how much smaller that grid space is. And now, look at how precisely I can actually move this. Okay. Again, so all I did was, my grid was set at 10 meters. By using the bracket keys that's next to the P key, the left bracket key makes my grid size smaller. The right bracket key makes my grid size larger. And so we were at 10 meters. And because of that, I need to come in closer. That's where we were. Each grid was 10 meters in size. And because of that, we couldn't move the hammer as precisely. So by using the left bracket key down to about 1 meter or 500 millimeters, and then zoom back out a little bit, now you've got a much, much smaller grid, and because of that, you can move your objects really smooth and precise. Okay? So next, in order to get this lighting set up, we need to decide what kind of light we want to use. So first things first, Command S or Control S. And remember, earlier in the course, I had made a scenes folder. Well, Lightwave now knows that because I had set my content directory to that project folder, it automatically opens the scenes folder for me. So we'll call this Hammer No Light. And you can load that up yourself. Now I'm going to resave it as Hammer Lit. Like that. You'll notice that the light is really, really tiny. A lot of that has to do with the tiny little grid that we just created. Well, I can actually change my grid back a little bit now just by hitting the right bracket key, going up to maybe about 1 meter, maybe 2 meters. We don't need to be as precise, and then kind of zooming back in. The other thing you can do is press the D key. And if you come over, it opens the display tab. If you come over to the Handles and Icons tab down at the bottom of the display, there's a light icon, and look what you can do. You can make it really big. So if I go back to my left bracket key a couple times down to a 100 millimeter grid down here at the bottom left, and I zoom back out, I can then make my light much bigger. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now we're going to kind of do a balance of those. We're going to maybe go to about 2 meters like I had said earlier, and then we'll zoom back in. And now that light's entirely too big, so we're going to shrink that down. But just remember you can do that if you need to and you're not seeing your objects. Okay, it doesn't change the light source at all. It's just a layout reference. All right, and for this, I'm going to put on VPR mode, the Virtual Preview Render. And instantly we get to see that we've got shadows and everything else, and will help us place our hammer a little bit better. But in this mode, it's hard to see your lights. Well, you can fix that with this little drop down right here. There's OpenGL wireframe. And what that does is any wireframe object, any object selected in layout, you can actually see the wireframe. Well, that's good, but we're going to select it again to turn it off. You can also turn on you can also turn on OpenGL overlay. And that's what we want to do here, is that now we've got a real-time render, but we actually can see the whole layout in wireframe, allowing us to choose our lights and our cameras and everything else pretty easily. So I'm going to click on the light right here. Now here's something I want to show you about this light. This is a distant light. It's a default light. This is always here by default when you start up Lightwave. And notice as I'm moving it, the lighting and the shadows don't change on that object. Okay, this kind of light, only its rotation matters. So I press the Y command to rotate, and you can actually see changing. That is our default light. Let's press the P key with the light selected, and the light type we're going to change from distant to area. Now, area lights are my favorite because they automatically have a nice fall off that you can just put right on. You can change the size of it by pressing the size button or Shift H and just click and drag. And then if you press the T key, we can move this over. And for the fall off, it has a nominal range of 1 meter. Well, if my grid is 2 meters, you can see that down here at the bottom left, that means every grid is 2 meters in size. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm not even getting half a meter. So we want this at least like 8 or 10 meters. And now you can see that the light is coming out of there. And it's a great way to really concentrate a light source because it just falls off after a while. And it just has a very nice realistic look. So I'd rather add more lights as needed than just try and flood the light and try and block it in some way. And when you size it with the Shift H, that shadow is going to get softer. So pretty neat. And then you can play, of course, with the fall off interactively like this. And if it gets really too bright, but that's what you like, you can then, of course, bring the intensity back like that. Totally up to you how you want to do it. So in this case, I'm going to bring the nominal range down a bit and just kind of do a little balance. And we'll set the color just to off-white. Just a little bit of color in there. Warm it up. So let's save the scene again. Hammer lit, click yes. Now some of these other lights, dome light, well, they create a dome and create this very nice sort of probe-like high dynamic range type image thing. And not an HDR image like you would see in photography, but using HDR in 3D where the light is coming from an image and has this very kind of studio environment where it's just lit from everywhere. And if we make it this brighter, it's really, really nice. And to be honest, I really don't use these that much. I should, but I don't. Because they're really nice. And this just represents where the light's coming from. So imagine this dome being a mini little version encompassing your scene. Dome lights. There's a linear light. It's kind of like an area light, but just linear. It's kind of neat. And of course, you can always play with the intensity of it, like we've done here. I've used these for airplanes, under cabinets, things like that. Works really well. An N-gon light. So when you've got polygons made up of more than 4 vertices, and I've had this, you can use this light to help light your scene. Sometimes you'll get some errors with certain types of lights depending on how your geometry is shaped. And you'll want an object light like this. Also has a nice fall off. A photometric light. Now what this light does, this is an IES file. You can download these off the internet, and it's essentially like a preset light with very specific parameters and everything calculated within it. Great for architecture. A point light, good old standard. That you move it around anywhere you want, kind of like a little Tinkerbell type of light. You can rotate it, but that's not going to make any difference, just its position. And again, you press the D key, you can change the light icon size, just like that, down in the display tab. A spherical light, okay, just kind of a round sphere from all over. And finally, we've got a spotlight, also very common, very, very used light. And you can move its position, you'll see it change, and you can rotate it, and you'll see it change. You can also change the spotlight soft edge angle, and that makes a very soft fall off, and then you can play with the cone, and then get this really tremendous, nice lighting look. And again, I'm doing this in real time in this VPR OpenGL on a laptop. So the system is very, very efficient. I've used these lights for all kinds of things, logos and interiors and lamps and headlights on cars, you name it. All right, so let's go back to an area light. And as we move in our course, you'll actually see some of the other features in the lighting setting. And as important as lighting is, I can't believe I'm going to say this as a photographer, you don't need to worry about it too much. Yes, that's right, I said it. Because you want to do it visually. You don't have to worry about wires and f-stops and balance, you do it visually. So if it's too bright, you turn the intensity down. If it's too dark, turn it up. If the fall off, if it's ending too soon, increase the fall off. Or hey, don't use one at all. Just let it light the whole scene. And maybe that's what we'll do here. Pull it up like this and we can get nice light over everything. Increase the intensity a bit. Looks good. Hey, maybe we want another one. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click that one, say this is main key light. Save the scene. Then we're going to press Control C on the keyboard with the light selected. Let's click into layout to do it. And it says clone current item. You can clone anything you want just by hitting Control C. And we'll make one clone. And I better wrap up this video because it's probably getting pretty long. And then I'm going to rotate this little guy here. And what we're going to do with this is jump to light view. So I'll press 5 on my keyboard. And notice that VPR still works with the overlay. And again, I'm working in a real-time render, which is just very cool. T key for move, and then the right mouse button. And in my Mac, I hold the command key down. We're just moving this light down low. Press the T key again, just to make sure. Y key for rotate. And we'll just do it like that. And we'll press 4 to get back to perspective mode. And what I'm doing with this light back here is giving this kind of a little tint. I'll put a little blue on there, just like that, changing the color. Okay. Press the T key. And kind of move it like that. Okay, and that just creates a nice kind of light source right there. And if we want to increase that, looks good. You can also use a spotlight here, but I want to keep this nice soft shadowing. Lastly, before we finish this up, let's zoom in. I'm going to turn my overlay off just for a little more speed. I'm going to select the hammer, making sure down here object hammer selected. Press the Y command. And in fact, you know what? I am going to put overlay back on because I want to be able to grab my handle here. And we are going to move this like that. Just set it on the ground a little bit more. And just going to tweak it up. And in fact, let me turn off VPR just for the time being. Just be a little smoother. There we go. And then we'll put VPR back on. Looks good. Spacebar to just get rid of that rotate. And Command S to save. And we'll say OK. So we haven't set up any camera at all or anything. But we'll do that soon. But first, we're going to get into surfacing now. All right, so as important as lighting is, let me save this. I just gave you a quickie overview, and it's really important, and it's actually working better than ever in Lightwave. But the interesting thing is that there's not a lot that you really have to study. We're going to put a light on. We're going to make it look right. You're going to set some color to add a little bit of environment back here, just so it's not just one main source kind of floating above it. And just like that, we've kind of lit a really nice looking scene with a surface that's been untouched. We actually haven't put any surfaces on here, just the simple colors from modelers. So let's go into the next video, and I'm going to show you how you can put some nice metal on here and reflections, and we'll work with some of the shading tools for the floor.